Let's get down to business. Let's let you know about those additions that were made around the Chicago Cubs nooks and crannies. You see the list of names. Kevin Gausman, that was the first major domino to fall. And then all the others, they followed suit. Clay Holmes, Ryan Zeferjahn, Braxton Garrett, and Tyrone Taylor. As we said, these Chicago Cubs, at least according to us, they got an A+. So let's bring in the man who helped orchestrate some of those moves. It's Cubs GM Carter Hawkins. Carter, thanks so much for stopping by. As always, we just saw all the names that are now Chicago Cubs. We gave it an A internally. What grade do you guys give it?
I don't want to grade it necessarily, but we were definitely happy with the outcome. Felt like a lot of hard work over the last few weeks with a lot of our group in the office over there, and to be able to come off with the pitchers that we're able to bring on, and then reinforce our position player group as well with Tyrone Taylor. It's pretty encouraging, and we got a solid team, and just really excited about this race.
Yeah, we heard Jed say that Kevin Gausman was that white whale, that player that you guys have been in search of for so long. What went into the actual process at making Kevin Gausman a Chicago Cub?
Yeah, I mean it's tens of phone calls, just per player, right? Yeah. So hundreds of phone calls and text, over the course of the week, and it certainly started speeding up over the weekend. So we were talking to Toronto about, several different deals. They had a lot of good players that were interesting that were on the market, and we started lining up. I think it was Saturday. It starts to blend together a little bit.
It does.
But we're able to pull the trigger by Saturday night and get them on board. So really, really excited about that, and really, really excited about just the experience that he has. He's pitched in World Series. He's been up, he's been down, he's been on waivers. It's a pretty resilient guy, which speaks to kind of the team that we have as well. It's just a resilient group that has been through some battles and has a chance to do some really special things here.
Absolutely.
Carter, we showed the names. I've always wondered about the personalities that you acquire, because you have a good mix here. I've talked, we talk about the boys all the time about close knit. How do you go about knowing these guys or figuring out how these guys are going to mix with the group you already have?
Yeah, you talk to people that have played with them. You talk to guys that have coached with them. We have a dugout and we have a clubhouse with guys that have been around the league for a long time. And so with the Gausman, you got the LSU connection. You're going to talk to Bregman, right? If it's a Vandy guy, we only got 100 of those around, so we'll talk to those guys. But you have the opportunity to get it from guys that have actually spent time in a clubhouse, in a dugout, in the trenches. That tends to be the best references, and we definitely hit those hard.
So when you look at these trades, it's always about what you give up to get, because you got to give up something good to get these type of players, right? So how do you look at a guy like Rojas, who's right up there with Mo as far as how good he is as far as prospect-wise, with Clay Holmes and Gausman pending free agents? How's that play in the mindset of you guys moving forward?
Yeah, so for me and Jed and in our entire front office, our job is obviously to put the best team on the field today, but also think about the future. And that's not something that people like to talk about all the time. Obviously, we've been down that road, but it's a reality. And as you think about dealing away a guy like a Rojas or a Bally, it hurts. Yeah. It's uncomfortable. I think the thing that really helped moot some of that for us this year was just knowing the guys that have come up in the system and really improved our depth. So obviously having a center fielder like Pico Armstrong makes it a little bit easier to deal with a center fielder like Brett Bateman. Having an infield like we have makes it easier to deal a Ty Southacine or to deal a Jefferson Rojas. So that aspect, from a scouting and development standpoint, to build that depth, it kind of unlocks the ability to make some of these moves that theoretically could hurt the future, but it doesn't as much when you know that you have guys that are also coming up right behind them.
Gotcha. And I know you're a big fan of Cubs Live. Now, you've been watching, you've been hearing me bang the drum along with Mike Petriello and Lance for Ryan Zeferjahn. That's why you guys made the decision, right? How is he going to lengthen that pen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably definitely one of your biggest followers.
Okay.
Have kids fall asleep to it every night.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that just plus stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And the ability to miss bats late in the game. And has some control as well, meaning that he can be with us for a long time. Those are the types of relievers that, you look at, guys that Craig Counsell has had success with in the past. Those are the types of guys that, he really loves. And, Counsell was in our room, yesterday and was, kind of part of some of these conversations. And he was definitely one of the guys that you could see him perk up a little bit when we started talking about him. So obviously, giving up a Ballesteros and a McGuire in that deal is not, is nothing to sneeze at, but to get a guy that potentially can help us win baseball games, late into the season here down a race, it's pretty exciting.
Do you think a player like Ryan Zeferjahn is going to help and give the guys a little bit of an extra boost coming out of the bullpen? Players like Jacob Webb, Daniel Palencia when he gets back in the mix?
I think, one thing that has not been talked enough about is just how great our bullpen has been, over the last several weeks. And withstanding a lot of the injuries, we've really leaned on those guys and a bunch of different guys, 30 plus different pitchers and a bunch of different guys getting saves. But, they can't do that for 162. Right. So the ability to give a little bit of a cushion there to provide some reinforcements was something we felt really strongly we needed to do. Zeferjahn is definitely one of those guys that's going to do that for us. We got some guys starting rehab assignments pretty soon, your Daniel Polinices of the world, that hopefully can help that as well. And I'm just excited about seeing all this come together and hopefully at the right time.
Now, how do you guys come about with a guy like Clay Holmes coming off the IL and protect him from himself? Because you ask me, I'm going to say, Carter, I want to play, right? I want to go out there on the field and help the boys and get acclimated with my new teammates and so on and so forth. But how do you protect him from doing something where he, maybe he should have another rehab stop? Whatever the case may be, how do you go about that with a guy like him?
Yeah, first it's talking to the player, and making sure you understand him where he is, and certainly the player, if it's the kind of guy like Clay Holmes that's done the things that he's done, he's going to say, I'm going to play, right? So we're not asking him, are you ready to play? We're asking him how you feeling,
right.
What are the different things you've been doing, what's your routine, when's your next bullpen, how's the rehab process going? You're asking a bunch of questions. We also have a bunch of objective information, right? So we have all of the pitch data from his rehab starts. We have all of the different information about how his body's feeling, about how he's performing in the weight room, all those different types of things. So you put that all together, and then you try to make a really good decision for the player and for the team. So he's, very close to being ready to go.
Yeah.
We'll make that decision here shortly, but definitely was a guy when we acquired him, we knew it wasn't going to be a lengthy process to get him back on a major league mound.
As far as the depth you have now, how much of a luxury, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, but the luxury now is having a slew of players to deal with, but also getting these guys in the game and figuring out what guys are going to be lone guys and so on and so forth. So how do you go about that decision when everybody is back healthy?
Yeah, so I was talking about that with Counts today, before I came over here, and, we kind of caught ourselves and we're like, hey, this is a good problem to have.
Right.
Like
Absolutely. We had this problem for
Yeah, exactly. It's feast or famine, and
right.
It definitely feels like you got too much or too little. And you prefer to have the too much.
Right.
But it's those conversations around, okay, what gives us the most flexibility? What gives us the best chance to win baseball games? What gives us the best chance to win that game in September that we're not thinking about because we've, kept guys stretched out or brought guys back in? How can guys recover, in terms of like what are the types of guys that, maybe moving into the bullpen? Are those guys that can pitch back to back? Can they pitch off pitch? All those different types of things. And so it's a big puzzle, and it's a lot of conversations, and it's changing pretty consistently. But between Tommy, between Counts, Jed, Jared Banner, having a lot of those conversations, and make decisions that hopefully work out for us in the end.
Yeah. We heard Cliff lean into clubhouse chemistry. How important was it to bring a peripheral piece like Tyrone Taylor in, who has familiarity with Craig Counsell? 2019 through 2023, he was a Brewer.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can reinforce that depth, having a right-handed bat, with Matty Shaw being on the IL, I think he kind of helps fill that position for us a little bit. Obviously, Kevin did a great job last night, but getting the veteran presence with Tyrone's really important for us. And, feel like, in a night like tonight when you got a tough lefty on the mound, the more right-handers you can have, the better off you're going to be. And, who knows what it's going to look like, hopefully in the playoffs here. And having that depth is really, really important for us.
Are you at liberty to give us a Matt Shaw update, or is it sooner rather than later?
So Matt Shaw is, in the rehab process. We don't have a date for, first game for him. So he's starting to swing. We'll see where it goes from there. But, obviously we brought in Tyrone, so that's where our focus will be in terms of the Major League team today.
Okay, the focus will be on Tyrone Taylor and everybody getting back to full health. Good news all the way around, especially after yesterday's Major League Baseball trade deadline. Like we said, this man right here was a part of it. Cubs GM Carter Hawkins. Carter, as always,
Appreciate it, guys.
thank you
Absolutely.
for the time, man.